Some years ago, Bill sent me this hand drawing he made of J-Rod 1, as he himself became known as J-Rod 2. Note the skull, the hands, and long, strong fingers, and the alien's demeanor. This is not a proud but rather scared-looking being, huddled up in an army jacket. The alien's hands are strong and heavy-boned, with long, strong fingernails. Bill was to be seen wearing a logo with J-Rod 3 on it. Who or what this refers to remains unknown. Bill gave me this photograph of a pilot wearing a Gray's fake mask in the cockpit of a US Air Force tank buster jet. This posed photograph reveals much about J-Rod. It shows it's an allowed US Air Force picture of an alien on a US Air Force base. It tells us we have aliens in our bases and we work with them, and they fly our craft and we do theirs. UHOUSE is described in the Desert Rat with the codename J-Rod. J-Rod spent most of his career at the test sites, one of which appears to be in the Los Alamos laboratories in New Mexico. He does not talk about specific facilities, but does mention Area 51 as the test site in the interview that follows. UHOUSE states directly that they want the leaks. They don't want to be caught out in the big lie. UHOUSE mentions 4 types of aliens that he dealt with. One of them were the Greys. He describes their planets and their culture. Bill agreed to talk to me on camera, so we give you the entire Bill UHOUSE interview on a late, sunny afternoon in December in eastern Nevada. Well, it's
but
Bill,
you can watch.
It's Bill UHOUSE. Tell us what's going on, what's happening.
In what areas?
51 UFOs. What's happening down in the alien bases?
Alien down underneath.
Yeah.
Last September I gave a lecture up at Rachel, Nevada with Anthony Hilder. And of course Anthony was looking for certain information and asked me if I've ever been to, on the test site. And I had, but only on various different particular projects. They were small projects, but not for any extended period. So 3 weeks now, maybe a month, at intervals. But they were all on specific projects, not necessarily to do with flying saucers. There were some questions on the tunnels out there at the test site. And they questioned me whether I had been in tunnels, and I had been in tunnels. As far as the nuclear aspect is concerned, they have built tunnels for testing of various devices in certain mountains out there. And also they've drilled and exploded bombs, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet below the desert floor. But on a specific tunnel that I was in, you could fit 2 locomotives going in either direction, plus a center road with a tractor-trailer truck for hauling parts and stuff. I know that of only one tunnel that I've been in where we did some testing of a particular item, and this was about approximately 6 miles into the mountain. In a facility in that mountain that was specifically set aside for my group and my team. Those particular items that I worked on was basically technologically some science that was related to flying disc, but not necessarily for a flying disc. It was for a different project. There's so many different projects out there. And of course, the facility that I worked at, that there's just too numerous to mention. Plus, I can't identify code names, and I can't identify companies. Although there are a number of different representatives from various different companies that are completely involved in this alien technology and the transfer of technology for the new aircraft or the flying discs. In some cases, the Aurora, where they tested various different devices. In some cases, the F-117, where they had applied some of this technology for the certain devices in the craft to more or less test them out, just like any other program that would test a new item out on something that we know how to fly, and it's a little bit different than a flying disc in that application.
So what are the latest technologies that they're using out there, the latest craft? You mentioned earlier about simulators.
I only had to do with simulators, and as you know, when they design a new craft or a company develops a new craft, there's always a simulator that's being built right alongside of the craft that they're going to fly. Whether it's the F-117 or the Aurora or any other new aircraft.
So are there alien discs out there?
Are there aliens out here at Area 51? I don't know of aliens out there at Area 51, though.
Are there areas that you prefer not to talk about or not?
There are aliens that I know of in other facilities throughout the country, but not at Area 51. There could be. I'm sure there is.
What type of aliens would they be?
The aliens that they have, there's only a few that are here. They're the Greys, or the grayish, so to speak, that type of individual. I don't understand this case about the reptilians. I know that where these individuals come from, it's not set up like here on Earth where you have the different races, the Chinese, Japanese, and so forth. The difference in those particular individuals, they're on different planets. For example, you got in the Zeta Reticuli star system, there's a number of different planets. There's Harlequin, there's Dorado, there's many others. For example, those particular individuals that are on each one of those planets do a different thing. They're not basically like we are set up here on Earth, okay? Well, I guess you could say that, for example, I'm talking about religion now, you got Buddhism, and you got the Mideast, Arabic, religions and so forth and so on. And you got the Catholics and so forth. It's not necessarily like that. It's they only have one religion, and it's not the same as we know it. Theirs is more or less a spiritual type religion. They don't have a church they go to. They don't go to church every Sunday. It's nothing specific like that.
How does one know this?
How does one know that? Well, you have to go through a long period of I don't want to say acclimation, but it's a long period of understanding, and knowing what questions they ask, and trying to understand how I got it. Okay, because that information, a lot of it is like asking me what they eat, or what do they want from us, and that type of thing. And each one of those from those different planets could be different in what they really want from this planet. It could be like, I don't understand the abduction scenario. I don't understand the various different, so they speak, number of different aliens that are supposedly coming here. From what I understand, there's maybe only no more than 6 different species, if that, and not the 70 or 73 that John Laird talks about.
So in what other facilities would the aliens be?
Mostly the facilities that are located in Arizona, New Mexico. Delsey? It's a possibility.
So you're being non-specific, but they are in other areas.
I don't know all of the areas. I've never been really underground to determine that. Okay, it's like I said, I was in one underground facility. It was out here at Area 50, not necessarily 51, but it was in.
Are they all the same area?
Well, if you went into the test site, you've got certain orders. You go to a certain location, and unless you know the facility, if you walked in there blindly like yourself, or they took you for a ride, you wouldn't know where you are on that test site.
Bob LAZAR, John Lear.
Bob LAZAR, what he did, the reason why Bob LAZAR was cleared was because of Teller. You know, a guy with that kind of clearance, it'd be pretty easy to get Bob LAZAR in his facility. But, you know, and I can understand Bob going to the security. It's very degrading and you know, to the, if, for example, a young fellow like yourself going to security like that, it would be maybe embarrassing, maybe degrading, or you would, you know, maybe not say the same thing over and over, because you'll go to a number of psychologists before they even say, hey, you're okay. You know, and not knowing what each one's going to ask you, you know, you may not even tell us. You might forget, or, you know, tell the story a little bit different, you know, and that'd kind of upset things. But what Bob LAZAR's done in his demonstration of putting out this poster with these particular one craft that he called a sport model, from what I know, okay, it's fairly accurate.
So the model that you can buy in the shops, that Bob LAZAR's marketing, is an accurate representation?
Well, it's an actual representative of what Bob LAZAR knows and what he's seen at the test site.
So those discs are then man-made discs? Are they
That may have not been a man-made disc.
The S4 facility is an area just off the Papoose lake bed, dry lake bed. It consists of 9 hangars. The hangars have sloped doors on them with a sand texture coating. The first disc I saw, I believe it was the second, or I think it was the third time I was up there. Upon seeing it, it struck me that, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. Not thinking that it was an extraterrestrial craft, that this must have been some advanced form of fighter that we've been working on for years, and, you know, people have just caught it being tested, so on and so forth. And it never even occurred to me, even though I was looking at an extraterrestrial vehicle, that, you know, this wasn't man-made. I only witnessed one test flight up close, officially. That I was just inside the hangar. It was a low-performance test. The craft lifted off the ground, virtually noiseless, other than a small corona discharge on the bottom of the craft, indicating the presence of high voltage. That dissipated at about 30 feet, and it stood there completely silently, and moved over to the left and to the right, and sat back down. That was the entire test. It probably really hit me when I got inside the craft and looked around and began to understand how the craft was operated, and finally grasped the whole project as a whole, as what we were doing, the fact that we weren't building this thing, we were trying to find out how it was made. We were back engineering it.
As early as the 1950s, the government publicly acknowledged they were researching the UFO phenomenon in order to gain a technological advantage.
A squad of 20 fully equipped Marines board the flying saucer. A preview of what may be the all-purpose vehicle of the future.
I give everything nicknames there. The one I worked on was kind of sleek looking, and I gave it the name the Sport model. There was one that looked like a Jello mold. There was one that looked like a top hat.
Extraterrestrial craft, like the ones LAZAR witnessed at S4, have been filmed and photographed around the world. In 1991, this footage made worldwide headlines. These 2 discs were videotaped in a suburb outside Ottawa, Canada. Both UFOs landed in a vacant field across from the photographer's house. This videotape became known as the Guardian footage. Again in 1991, Screaming eyewitnesses prompted a tourist to take this picture from Manhattan Island in New York. The disc emerged from the river and quickly flew off. Another craft was photographed rising out of the water in Australia. Before it flew away, it docked with a smaller, dark UFO. A similar dark object was photographed in Denver. Startled eyewitnesses snapped this picture from a neighbor's backyard. In Peru, a hiker took this photograph of two discs as they hovered overhead for several minutes. LAZAR's classified work at S4 allowed him to closely study the extraterrestrial craft.
I had to hang upside down in there to see the lower level, essentially. And there were three large gravity amplifiers. These devices looked like about a 2-foot diameter, 4-foot long piece of pipe hanging by a smaller piece of pipe from the level above, and they can be independently positioned. And that's what emits the gravitational waves that propel the craft. They'll use one gravity generator to lift the craft off the ground. And as opposed to what we're used to, for instance, a plane, once it's in the air, we envision thrust or some force coming out the back of it to push it forward. The crafts work completely opposite of that. What they do is once they're hovering in the air, they'll swing the two remaining gravity generators up in front of them and create a distortion, essentially a downhill, and the craft rolls downhill for infinity. It's always chasing a little distortion.
Unidentified craft have been filmed and photographed flying around the world in radically different positions. LAZAR explains.
Essentially, the craft will tilt up on its side, focus the three gravity generators to a single point, and move through space that way.
LAZAR helps explain why UFOs have been videotaped flying in seemingly erratic patterns.
Moving around a source of gravity is a problem to a disk because it's interference, essentially. That's why they look goofy when they fly around at low speed. The gravity field around the Earth is not completely constant and stable, depending on the minerals and density of the Earth underneath it. The gravity will vary somewhat, and you will get odd movements of the craft. So its low-speed mode is kind of unstable for the most part.
In 1978, this UFO footage was taken by a New Zealand film crew. When the footage was enhanced, the craft appeared to have two portals and a rim around the center. The object was moving at such high speed, it left this track on a single frame of film. Photographic analysis revealed the craft was moving at 6,000 miles per hour. No conventional aircraft can maneuver at this speed.
Just because you can visually see, either with the eye or on radar, a craft moving at 7,000 miles an hour and making a 90-degree turn doesn't mean that's what's happening. Don't forget, again, that the craft is distorting space and time, so your eyes are fooling you. I mean, the craft does not necessarily have to be moving like that. People wonder how a craft like this can make a turn at such high speed, a 90-degree turn, when they would imagine people slamming up against the wall or something to that effect. Well, that really wouldn't happen. Inertia would have no effect. You're in a distortion, and don't forget that gravity distorts time and space, so really nothing is going to influence you while you're in there.
One thing most close encounters have in common is light. UFO sightings usually appear as lights in the sky, or the craft appears to glow. LAZAR explains this aspect of the phenomena.
If you were going to see one of these crafts at night operating, it would appear really as a glowing ball or just a bright light in the sky from a distance. Even close up, you'd see a glowing halo around it. What you're dealing with is a high energy source in essentially a gas atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, and when you apply enough energy to a gas molecule, they emit photons, they emit light. It's really a byproduct of how the craft operates. When it's emitting that much energy, the gas surrounding the craft emits light, the same reason why lightning is visible. You have a huge electrical discharge, and the gas emits light in the form of lightning. Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are, and the craft are there must be some sort of factory.
Yes, well, as we get older and older, I'm 77 right now. You can't live forever, you know. So if this procedure I'm going to have to clean the blood doesn't work, then I've got probably a few more months to make it before my kidneys shut down, you know. So that's kind of why I'm kind of going along with the interview at this time.
You're seeing that what you went through is just too important for people not to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just, can we start at the beginning with your military career and just walk through what exactly your experiences were?
Was drafted into the military and got into the U.S. Army. After that, I was sent to the Signal Training Center in eastern United States.
What year would this be?
58. I went through the Signal Training course. And at that time, I went through the radio teletype course and also the cryptography course, crypto. They had 5 instructors that were getting out of military service. So they pulled the top 5 students, and I was 3rd in the class. So I got pulled as an instructor.
Now, were you at this time also working yet for CIA?
No.
Not yet?
No. After one day, my boss came to me, and he said, how would you like to, make some extra money? And I said, oh, money is good. So he's explained to me that he could put it through, would have to get a top secret White House Q clearance for the job, And I thought, boy, must be a pretty exclusive thing, And I said, well, what is this? And he said that I'm director for the CIA for Eastern United States, And I said, oh, I didn't know that. And he said, you weren't supposed to. After about 6 weeks, my security clearance came through, and I got my CIA card. It was an ID card, like a credit card, where I could just go up to the door and slice it, walk right in. And my name at that time, I used an artificial name too. Never used my real name. I started working with him on the project he was on. And that was Project Blue Book, which was kind of partially a fraud.
You're saying some of the Blue Book cases were,
Yes.
were completely fictitious?
Yes. But the cases that we got came from, I think it was Fort Belvoir, Maryland.
Fort Belvoir?
Yeah. And it didn't come from the Pentagon, or it didn't come from CIA headquarters. But we would get reports about a certain sighting that they had in Mexico or Italy or something like that. And then we had people that would follow through on it, that would go out and interview the people to see if they were nutcases or if it was real,
So they'd be going overseas frequently?
I wasn't, but I always stayed statewide. But the people we had working with us from the CIA would do that. We would get like a new report probably a couple times a week. I was coming into the Army fresh off the farm, so I really didn't have much knowledge of anything. But my boss filled me in on Project Blue Book and what they had found so far, as far as grays and aliens and the Roswell incident.
How did you feel when this first got dumped on you? When you first learned about this?
I was just kind of overwhelmed with all of this, you know. And I said to him, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be a judge of this type of thing. What's real, what's not, when I don't have much knowledge of it, you know. So...
What did he say?
He said, well, we have to build the information as we go, and you'll see how this thing is working out.
And then the other thing is, of course, you really weren't able to tell family or close friends, obviously.
No, I couldn't tell anybody. In fact, I had to take a vow that I wouldn't tell anybody. A lot of it for 40 years, and more of it for 50 years, which is up in 2010.
You're doing all this crypto work, you're looking at images, photographs, video. It's 1958, maybe the fall of 58. What happened after this?
At that time, the Project Blue Book thing kind of went pot, you know. If you remember, back in those days, they kind of declared it as a nothing, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
they were telling the world all UFOs are misidentifications, hoaxes,
balloons.
Psychological issues, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my boss came to me and he says, we've both got a new assignment. And he says, oh, I said, where are we going? Oh, he says, we're going to the Capitol. We're going to be part of the Eisenhower push. He's trying to find out something about, all about these aliens that MJ-12 was supposed to find out, but never sent back reports to him.
The MJ-12, the UFO control group, were they calling it MJ-12 at that time? Yes.
They called us in, went into the Oval Office, and President Eisenhower was there and Nixon, and they said, we called the people in from MJ-12 from Area 51 and S4, but they told us that the government had no jurisdiction over what they were doing. So being a general, past general, you didn't tell them to go to hell without any real good reason, you know. Mm-hmm. So he said, I want you and your boss to fly out there. I want you to give them a personal message. And he says, I want you to tell them, whoever is in charge, tell them that to get in, they have this week, coming week, to get into Washington and to report to me. And if they don't, I'm gonna get the First Army from Colorado and we're gonna go over, I'm gonna take the base over. I don't care what kind of classified material you got. We're gonna rip this thing apart.
Eisenhower was going to invade
Area 51. Yeah, with the First Army.
So you go out with your superior.
Yes.
You fly out. You land. What happens? Can you describe this whole process? What you saw?
It took us the 13 or 15 miles south to S4 and like different garage door openings.
Okay.
And in these garage door openings, they had like different saucer crafts. The very first one had the Roswell craft in. It was kind of crashed up, but apparently every alien that was in it died except for a couple.
So you see the Roswell craft, and what are some of the others that you see?
Well, the Roswell craft was really strange because it looked like real heavy aluminum foil. We could rock next to it and you could rock it. The whole thing probably weighed 150, 300 pounds.
Could they tell what the source of power was of this craft?
Yeah, it was like a reverse gravitational thing of some kind. In fact, one later on, I got the mathematical code for reversing gravity in a 3x5 card. I guess there are different types of grays and so on.
How did you see that evidence?
Well, at the later on at S4, we viewed the autopsy film, and then the colonel said, "What we've got in here is we're interviewing a gray alien."
All right, right there. How did you feel at that moment?
Well, I thought, boy, we had no idea we were going to see the real thing. All we saw was film.
You had to have a little bit of heart racing at that
Yes.
moment.
My boss was able to go in and had a partial interview with him.
So what did this gray alien look like? Could you describe him a little bit?
This one looked a little bit oriental.
So I'm just wondering if it looked almost human, what about this didn't look human?
No, it didn't look human as far as the skin tone and basically the shape of it and the size.
How was its head size compared with a normal human, for example?
Brain was kind of a little bit bigger. And some of the nose was very, very small. And the ears were just like holes. Mouth was very small.
Now, why were they bringing you out here at all, anyway, to see an alien? What was the point?
To go back and tell the president they actually had one.
So he did not know at this point
No,
if there was an alien at S4.
no.
What did you do then at Area? Were you done, or did you have other things to do at
Yeah, so
S4?
basically we were kind of done, went back to Area 51. They took us into the main building, and there we saw a U2, which of course we didn't know existed. And a model of the SR-71.
Yeah, the Blackbird.
So, but like I mentioned earlier, it was not a model of the current Blackbird,
It's an earlier version.
but an early version.
Did you go directly to Washington after this?
Yes.
Or did you go somewhere else? How did they get, did you fly
We
regular airline or?
We flew back to the commuter plane back to the air base, and then took President Eisenhower's Lockheed Electra back to Washington.
You and your supervisor,
Yeah.
superior officer, and now you're meeting with the president?
Yes.
Can you describe this?
Well, we met with him in, the second story of the old OSS warehouse building. And Eisenhower and Nixon were there, and also Hoover was there. So he asked us what was going on, and we told him about the alien, the whole situation, and the black projects and so on. And he was just totally shocked. He appeared for the first time to be worried. You know, like he was worried.
I would think that Eisenhower would, I mean, he certainly knew that flying saucers were real.
Yes.
He knew that there were aliens. So I guess I'm just wondering, what would he have been, really surprised about?
surprised about the black programs. Eisenhower said, got to keep this thing completely secret. You know, can't talk about this.
Your actual name is, I mean, the name you grew up with, that was a different name than what you
Yes,
had in the...
I never used it in the CIA at all.
Now, what about today? You're going on the public record, and this is still sensitive information, even though earlier you talked about, you know, security oaths that maybe expire after a certain period of
50
time,
years.
but you're still concerned.
Linda Moulton-Howell's phone call, her phone was tapped, and they got my phone number, and through the telephone company, they were able to find me, and so on.
When they found you, what happened?
I was going to a grocery store. Two guys in a black suits come out of a black Lincoln town car and came over to see me. And they told me that I better not publish anything or talk to Linda about any more things. So at that time, I did, you know, I stopped.
That was enough to intimidate you.
Yes. Rather remain anonymous. Never show my face on anything.
Really, thank you for doing this.
Yes. This was, I guess, kind of a good idea because I feel much better having talked about it. I kind of feel like there's a load off my shoulders.
Really?
Because I had an awful lot of secrets that I had kept over the years.